The gilded doors of the elevator gleamed under the chandelier's glow in the penthouse lobby of the Obsidian Tower, a sleek Manhattan skyscraper that screamed money and power. Beyoncé stood poised in the center, her presence commanding even the empty space. Dressed in a tailored black jumpsuit that hugged her curves like a second skin, her stiletto heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she adjusted her wide-brimmed hat. Her team had just wrapped a late-night meeting with the label execs on the 47th floor, hashing out the final tracks for her next album, a project she'd poured her soul into, one that was already sparking whispers of a Grammy sweep. She glanced at her phone, 11:47 p.m. The city's pulse thrummed faintly through the glass walls, New York's skyline a constellation of ambition. Her security detail, Marcus and Lena, were a few steps behind, but she waved them off with a gentle flick of her wrist. "I got this," she said, her voice smooth but firm, the kind of tone that left no room for argument. She needed a moment alone, a rare breath of solitude before the chaos of her world swept her up again. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open with a whisper. Beyoncé stepped inside, the mirrored walls reflecting her every angle like a kaleidoscope of her own legend. She pressed the button for the ground floor, expecting a quick descent. But as the doors began to close, a figure slipped in at the last second, a woman, mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and a nervous energy that seemed to buzz in the air. She wore a navy blazer, her hands clutching a worn leather notebook, and her eyes widened when she realized who she was sharing the elevator with. "Oh my God," the woman gasped, her voice a mix of awe and panic. You're Beyoncé." Beyoncé offered a small, practiced smile, the kind she reserved for fans who caught her off guard. "Hey, darling," she said, her Texas drawl softening the edges of her words. "Just heading down. You good?" The woman nodded too quickly, her fingers tightening around the notebook. I'm Claire. Claire Thompson. I'm a journalist. I write for Vibe Pulse." Her words tumbled out like she was racing against the elevator's descent. "I've been trying to get an interview with you for, forever. I swear I'm not a stalker. This is fate, right?" Beyoncé's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked to the elevator panel. "Floor 42. The ride was going to take a minute." "Fate's a funny thing," she said, leaning back against the wall, her tone warm but guarded. "What's in that notebook of yours, Claire?" Claire's cheeks flushed, and she hesitated before flipping it open, revealing pages crammed with handwritten notes, clippings, and photos, some of Beyoncé, some of old album covers, and others of people Beyoncé didn't recognize. "It's research," Claire said. "I've been working on a story about you. Not just the music, but who you are. The real you. The woman behind the icon." Beyoncé raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. She'd heard every pitch in the book, but something about Claire's earnestness, or maybe her desperation, caught her attention. "The real me, huh?" she said, crossing her arms. "That's a tall order." Before Claire could respond, the elevator lurched, a sharp jolt that sent them both stumbling. The lights flickered, and a low groan echoed through the shaft. The panel blinked erratically, then went dark, leaving only the emergency light casting a dim red glow. The elevator stopped dead. Beyoncé steadied herself, her pulse quickening but her composure unshaken. Claire, on the other hand, clutched the railing, her breathing shallow. "Oh no, no," Claire muttered. "This can't be happening." "Relax," Beyoncé said, her voice calm but authoritative, like she was directing a rehearsal. She pressed the emergency button, but it didn't light up. She tried her phone. No signal. The Obsidian Tower, for all its glitz, apparently had elevators with all the reliability of a budget motel's Wi-Fi. "Looks like we're stuck," Beyoncé said, turning to Claire, who was now pale as a ghost. "You got any bars on that phone of yours?" Claire fumbled with her phone, shaking her head. "Nothing. Oh God, I'm claustrophobic. This is bad." Beyoncé exhaled, her mind already working. She'd been in tighter spots than this, metaphorically and otherwise. But as she glanced at Claire's notebook, now splayed open on the floor, a photo slipped out, catching her eye. It was grainy, old, but unmistakable, a young Beyoncé, maybe 16, backstage at a Destiny's Child gig, laughing with someone whose face was partially obscured. "Where'd you get that?" Beyoncé asked, her voice sharper now, all traces of her casual charm gone. Claire froze, following her gaze. I found it in an archive. It's part of my research. I swear, I wasn't trying to. The elevator groaned again, cutting her off, and the lights flickered back on for a split second before plunging them into darkness again. Beyoncé's eyes stayed locked on the photo, her mind racing. That picture wasn't just a memory. It was a secret, one she'd buried long ago. And now, trapped in this metal box with a stranger who knew too much, Beyoncé felt the walls closing in, and not just literally. The dim red glow of the emergency light painted the elevator's walls in a surreal haze, like a scene from a noir film. Beyoncé stood tall, her silhouette sharp against the mirrored walls, but her eyes were fixed on the grainy photo that had fallen from Claire's notebook. It lay on the floor between them, a relic from a past she'd long since locked away. The air felt thick, not just from the stalled elevator, but from the weight of what that image represented. A moment she hadn't thought about in years, one she'd never expected to surface in a stranger's hands. Claire, still gripping the railing, seemed to sense the shift in Beyoncé's demeanor. I didn't mean to. I mean, it's just research, she stammered, her voice trembling as much from the claustrophobia as from Beyoncé's piercing gaze. That photo, it was in a box of old press clippings at a thrift shop in Houston. I thought it was a cool find, for the story. Beyoncé crouched gracefully, picking up the photo with the precision of someone handling a live wire. Her fingers traced the edges, and for a fleeting moment, her face softened, betraying a flicker of vulnerability. The girl in the photo, her younger self, had been fearless, raw, on the cusp of stardom with Destiny's Child. But the figure beside her, half hidden in shadow, was a ghost from a life she'd left behind. Someone who'd known her before the world did. Houston, Beyoncé murmured, her voice low, almost to herself. You've been digging deep, Claire. She straightened, her composure snapping back like armor. What's this story of yours really about? 'Cause this, she held up the photo, ain't just about my music. Claire swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the notebook still splayed open on the floor. It's about your impact, she said, trying to steady her voice. Not just the hits, but the choices you made. The people you left behind to become who you are. I want to show the world the human side of Beyoncé, not just the queen. Beyoncé's laugh was soft but sharp, like the crack of a whip. The human side, she echoed, leaning back against the wall, her arms crossed. You think you can sum that up in a magazine spread? Honey, you don't know half of what it took to get here. Before Claire could respond, the elevator shuddered again, a metallic screech echoing through the shaft. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the panel lit up, showing they were stuck between floors 38 and 39. Beyoncé pressed the emergency button again, but it was as useless as before. She glanced at her phone, still no signal. The air was starting to feel stale, and Claire's breathing grew more ragged. Okay, Claire, Beyoncé said, her tone shifting to the calm authority she used in the studio. We're gonna stay cool, all right? Panicking ain't gonna get us out of here. Tell me more about this story. What's got you so obsessed you're carrying around photos from my past? Claire hesitated, then reached for her notebook, her hands shaking. It's not obsession, she said, defensive. It's respect. I've followed your career since I was a kid. But there are gaps, things that don't add up. Like why you never talk about certain people from back then. She pointed at the photo in Beyoncé's hand. Like her. Beyoncé's jaw tightened, but she kept her face unreadable. Her, she repeated, the word heavy. She didn't need to look at the photo again to know who Claire meant. The name was a whisper in her mind, one she hadn't spoken in decades. But before she could press further, the elevator jolted violently, dropping a few feet before stopping with a sickening lurch. Claire yelped, clutching the railing, while Beyoncé braced herself against the wall. The panel sparked, and a faint crackle came from the speaker above. Hello, a distorted voice called. This is building maintenance. We're working on the elevator. Can you hear me? Yes, Claire shouted, relief flooding her voice. We're here. Please hurry. Beyoncé's eyes stayed on the photo, her mind racing. Maintenance might get them out, but that photo, and Claire's questions, were a different kind of trap. Whoever Claire was, she wasn't just a fan or a journalist. She was chasing something, and Beyoncé had a sinking feeling it was more than a story. As the speaker crackled again, promising help within the hour, Beyoncé made a decision. She needed to know what Claire knew, and fast, before the doors opened and the world rushed back in. The elevator's emergency light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the mirrored walls. The air was heavy now, thick with the scent of Claire's floral perfume and the faint metallic tang of the stalled machine. Beyoncé stood near the control panel, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, like a panther sizing up its surroundings. The photo from Claire's notebook was still in her hand, its edges worn, but the memory it carried razor-sharp. The voice from the speaker had promised help, but the silence that followed felt like a held breath, and Beyoncé wasn't one to wait idly. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, her back against the railing, trying to steady her breathing. Her claustrophobia was a low hum of panic, but Beyoncé's presence seemed to anchor her, even if the air between them crackled with unspoken questions. "You're so calm," Claire said, her voice shaky but laced with admiration. "How do you do that? We're stuck in a metal box, and you're acting like it's just another Tuesday." Beyoncé's lips curved into a half-smile, her Texas drawl slipping through. "Darlin', I've been in tighter spots than this. You don't get to where I am without learning how to keep your cool." She tucked the photo into her pocket, a subtle move that didn't escape Claire's notice. "But you," Beyoncé continued, her tone light but probing, "you're carrying around pieces of my past like they're puzzle pieces. So let's talk. Who's this her you mentioned?" Claire's eyes widened, caught off guard. She glanced at her notebook, still open on the floor, its pages a chaotic collage of notes and clippings. I don't know her name," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I found references to her in old interviews, fan forums, stuff buried deep online. Someone close to you back in the Destiny's Child days. Someone who disappeared from the story after you went solo." Beyoncé's face remained a mask, but her mind raced. She didn't need Claire to say the name. It was already echoing in her head. A friend, a confidant, someone who'd known her before the spotlight burned away the edges of her old self. Someone who'd walked away, or been pushed, when the stakes got too high. But how had Claire, a journalist scraping by at Vibe Pulse, gotten so close to that truth? Before Beyoncé could press further, the elevator groaned, a deep, unsettling rumble that vibrated through the floor. Claire flinched, her hands gripping the railing again. "What was that?" she asked, her voice spiking with fear. Beyoncé stepped to the panel, her fingers brushing over the buttons as if sheer will could make them work. "Sounds like the cables," she said, her tone steady but her eyes scanning the ceiling. "They're trying to fix it, but this thing's old. Probably older than half my discography." Claire let out a nervous laugh, but it faded fast. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," she said, her words rushed. I've spent years on this story. I didn't expect to meet you like this. I thought maybe I'd get an email back from your team. Not this." She gestured at the elevator, her hands trembling. Beyoncé softened, just a fraction. She knew obsession when she saw it. She'd built a career on it, after all. "You're passionate," she said, crouching to meet Claire's gaze. "I respect that. But passion can make you reckless. You're digging into things that ain't just mine to tell." Claire nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know. But people deserve to know you, not just the icon. The choices you made, they shaped you. But they hurt people too, didn't they?" The words landed like a punch, but Beyoncé didn't flinch. She stood, her silhouette commanding even in the dim light. "Everybody gets hurt on the way up," she said quietly. "The trick is knowing what's worth the pain." A sudden crackle from the speaker broke the moment. "Maintenance here," the voice said clearer now. "We've got a team on the shaft. Hang tight. Should be moving in 15. Beyoncé exhaled, but her focus stayed on Claire. 15 minutes wasn't long, but it was enough time to figure out how much Claire really knew and whether she was a threat. As the elevator groaned again, Beyoncé caught a glimpse of something in the mirror, a shadow moving outside the doors, too quick to be sure. Her instincts kicked in. This wasn't just a broken elevator. Something was off, and she needed answers before those doors opened. The elevator's red emergency light pulsed like a heartbeat, casting eerie flickers across Beyoncé's face as she stood near the doors. The shadow she'd glimpsed in the mirror lingered in her mind, a fleeting shape, too deliberate to be a trick of the light. Her instincts, honed by years of navigating fame's underbelly, screamed that this wasn't just a mechanical glitch. Someone, or something, was watching them. She kept her expression neutral, but her hand rested lightly on the photo in her pocket, its weight heavier than the paper itself. Claire, still huddled on the floor, was oblivious to the shadow. Her focus split between her claustrophobia and the notebook she clutched like a lifeline. 15 minutes, she muttered, checking her watch. Feels like we've been in here forever. Her voice trembled, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes, like she was fighting to prove herself to the woman standing before her. Beyoncé crouched again, leveling her gaze with Claire's. Let's use this time, she said, her voice smooth but edged with purpose. You've got my attention, Claire. Tell me about this her you keep circling around. What's got you so curious about a ghost from my past? Claire hesitated, her fingers tightening on the notebook. It's not just curiosity, she said, her words careful, like she was stepping through a minefield. I found a letter tucked in with that photo at the thrift shop. It wasn't signed, but it was addressed to you. It talked about a promise you made, back when Destiny's Child was just starting. Something about never forgetting where you came from. The letter was angry, like you broke that promise. Beyoncé's face didn't betray the jolt those words sent through her. A promise. She remembered it. Vague, like a song lyric half forgotten, but real. A pact made in a Houston rehearsal studio, back when she was all dreams and grit, before the world crowned her queen. The letter, though, that was new. And dangerous. You've got this letter? She asked, her tone deceptively casual. Claire nodded, flipping through her notebook until she pulled out a folded piece of yellowed paper. It's here, she said, holding it out like an offering. I didn't know if it was real, but it felt personal. I thought it might be the key to understanding you. Beyoncé took the letter, her fingers brushing against the worn creases. She didn't unfold it. Not yet. The weight of Claire's words, and that shadow in the mirror, made her wary. You're playing with fire, Claire, she said softly, her Texas drawl cutting through the silence. Some stories aren't yours to tell. Before Claire could respond, the elevator lurched again, a violent jolt that sent the notebook sliding across the floor. Claire gasped, scrambling to grab it, while Beyoncé steadied herself against the wall. The speaker crackled, but no voice came through, just static, sharp and grating. Then, a faint scraping sound echoed from above, like metal on metal. What the hell was that? Claire whispered, her eyes wide. Beyoncé's gaze shot to the ceiling, where a small access panel was barely visible in the dim light. Someone's up there, she said, her voice low but certain. She stepped onto the railing, her heels clicking as she balanced with the grace of a performer. Peering at the panel, she saw it shift slightly, as if nudged from the other side. Maintenance? Claire asked, hopeful but unconvinced. Beyoncé didn't answer. Her mind was racing, piecing together the photo, the letter, and now this. She'd dealt with stalkers, leaks, and betrayals before, but this felt different, calculated, personal. Claire, she said, her voice calm but commanding, get behind me. Now. Claire obeyed, her fear outweighing her questions. Beyoncé slipped off her heels, her bare feet silent on the floor, and reached for the emergency button again, testing it. Nothing. The scraping above grew louder, and the panel creaked, a sliver of darkness appearing at its edge. Someone was coming. Beyoncé folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket with the photo. Whatever was happening, she wasn't about to let Claire, or whoever was behind that panel, catch her off guard. Stay sharp, she told Claire, her voice steady as steel. This ain't just an elevator ride anymore. The elevator's air was stifling now, the dim red emergency light flickering like a dying star. Beyoncé stood poised beneath the ceiling's access panel, her bare feet planted firmly on the floor, every muscle tensed for action. The scraping sound from above had stopped, but the silence was worse. Heavy, loaded, like the moment before a storm breaks. Claire huddled behind her, clutching her notebook, her breath shallow and quick. The letter and photo in Beyoncé's pocket felt like anchors, tying her to a past she'd worked hard to bury. Stay quiet, Beyoncé whispered, her voice low but sharp, cutting through the tension. Her eyes stayed locked on the access panel, where a thin sliver of darkness hinted at movement beyond. She wasn't sure who, or what, was up there, but she'd learned long ago to trust her gut, and it was screaming that this was no random malfunction. Claire nodded, her fear palpable, but there was a glint of resolve in her eyes. like she was clinging to the chance to prove herself. "Do you think it's maintenance?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Beyoncé didn't answer. Maintenance didn't move like shadows or pry open panels in silence. She stepped onto the railing again, her movements fluid, like she was choreographing a performance. Reaching up, she pressed a hand against the panel, testing its give. It shifted slightly, loose but not open. "Whoever's up there," she said, loud enough to carry. "You'd better think twice before messing with me." The words hung in the air, bold and unyielding, her Texas drawl laced with steel. For a moment, there was no response, just the faint hum of the elevator's systems. Then, a soft thud came from above, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps retreating across the elevator's roof. Beyoncé's jaw tightened. Someone was definitely up there, and they weren't sticking around to chat. Claire's eyes widened. "They're leaving?" she whispered, hope creeping into her voice. "Maybe," Beyoncé said, stepping down, her mind racing. "Or maybe they're playing a different game." She glanced at the letter in her pocket, its words still unread but burning in her thoughts. "A promise broken," Claire had said. A name from the past. Beyoncé didn't need to open it to know who it was about. Lila, her old friend, her shadow from the early days, before fame reshaped her world. Lila, who'd walked away when the spotlight got too bright, or so Beyoncé had told herself. She turned to Claire, her gaze piercing. "This letter," she said, holding it up but not unfolding it. "Where'd you say you found it again?" "Houston," Claire said quickly. "A thrift shop near your old neighborhood. It was in a box of music memorabilia, stuff from the 90s. I thought it was a fluke, but then I saw the photo, and it felt like a sign." Beyoncé's eyes narrowed. Houston wasn't just a coincidence. It was too close, too personal. "You don't just stumble on something like this," she said, her voice low. "Someone wanted you to find it." Claire frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Before Beyoncé could answer, the elevator jolted again, a sharp drop that sent them both stumbling. The lights flickered, and the speaker crackled back to life. "Maintenance here," the voice said, strained but clear. "We're close to getting you out. 5 minutes, tops. Hang in there." Beyoncé steadied herself, her hand on the wall. 5 minutes wasn't long, but it was enough time for trouble to find them. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the handwritten words in the dim light. "You promised we'd rise together, B. You forgot me, but I never forgot you." The signature was just a single letter, L. Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of memory crashing back. Claire watched her, hesitant. "Is it her?" she asked. Beyoncé folded the letter, her face unreadable. "Yeah," she said softly. "And if she's behind this, we're in deeper than I thought." As the elevator groaned again, Beyoncé braced herself. The doors might open soon, but so would a past she'd fought to keep closed.